Hi guys, it's Aoife from Fred We Z Died Laughing, and I'm here with another weekly wrap-up. So this week I managed to read 5 books. I'm really happy with everything that I read. I also was participating in the TBR Takedown 3.5 this weekend, and I've managed to read 1 book off my TBR. From that, I'm about 20% through the other one that I'm reading. I'm not sure if I'll get it finished tonight. I probably won't, so I'll carry that on into the genre-thon during this week. So yeah. So the first book I read this week was is my best book of the week, by far. Yes, definitely my best book of the week, and that was The Magic Strings of Frankie Presto by Mitch Albom. This book was just magical. I really loved it. It is about the life of this guy called Frankie Presto, and he was a musician. He's obviously a fictional person, but in the book he was kind of like this really famous musician around the time of Elvis and Johnny Cash, and in those kind of 50s and 60s, and it's kind of the story about where he came from, which was in the middle. He kind of grew up in the middle of Spain while it was under the reign of Franco, the dictatorship of Franco, and how he got out of Spain, why he had to get out of Spain, and kind of goes from there. And the magic thing about Frankie is that he has this guitar. He's had it for kind of like almost his entire life, and sometimes when he plays certain songs in certain situations, one of the strings turns blue. So during the course of his life, 6 of his strings turned blue, and it meant that his music had kind of changed the course of someone's life, and you kind of learn what happened in this book, and it is just really cool. The whole book is told by music. Like, music is is a being in this book, and it's really cool. And there are just some really beautiful quotes in it that I really liked, and I think if people like the Book Thief, they'd really like this book, because this is kind of like, it's a little bit of like a different version of the Book Thief, except it's to do with music, a love of music instead of a love of books. And then obviously the whole thing is told by music instead of being told by death, like in the Book Thief. And then again, Frankie grew up in post-World War II Franco, where Liza was growing up in World War II Hitler. So there are real similarities, and the kind of that lovely kind of conversational, weird kind of conversational tone of this higher being looking down is kind of the same with this book. I just really loved it. I gave it a 4.5 stars. I thought it could have been maybe a tiny bit shorter, and there were some things near the end that Frankie did that just kind of annoyed me. I thought some of the stuff he did was a little bit irrational, so he kind of annoyed me a little bit at times, but overall it was just a really beautiful, magical read, and I really loved it, and I really recommend it. It was just absolutely brilliant. So yeah, I would definitely tell people to read this book because it was just so good, such an enjoyable read. The next book I finished is a book that I've actually been reading for a couple of weeks, and it was a buddy read I did with Diana over at Dee's Journey, and I will link her channel down below, and it was The Bone Clocks by David Mitchell. This one is a really weird one to explain. It's basically about this girl who she kind of runs away from home when she's about 15, and she meets this woman who asks her for sanctuary or for refuge, and she just says yes. And she doesn't really know what she's saying, like what she's agreeing to, and we follow this girl kind of through the course of her entire life, and eventually we find out what it meant when the woman asked for refuge, and why this girl kind of has she has kind of her foot in this kind of bigger universe kind of that you would never know about. And yeah, it's just really weird. It's really hard to explain it without like spoiling things, but it's kind of a magic realism kind of book. Unfortunately, I didn't quite love it. I gave it a 2 stars. Diana liked it a lot more than I did, but I just felt like there were so many sections of the book that I just didn't enjoy, and I found a little bit boring. And each section, the first section is told by Holly, but then the other sections are told by different people. But then Holly is kind of, there's a link to Holly within each other POV. But for a while, like every time you start a new one, you're not really sure who they are, what they have to do with Holly. You're kind of trying to figure out who they are to the story, and it just gets a little bit boring. There were some parts that like I felt were completely unnecessary. It's quite a long book. It's like 500 pages, almost 600 pages. And there was one section that was really good near the end of it, which is where we kind of started to get kind of explanation of what was going on, because it was just so confusing. The entire book was so confusing because you had no idea what was going on, who these people were, who were, you know, kind of who was good, who was bad, what exactly these people were, what kind of magic was, you know, happening in the book, and you don't really get any explanations until like 400 pages in, which is quite a far bit in, and gradually the other bits do make sense. But that was really the only bit that really interested me, like that really kind of had a bit of action in it, that was a little bit exciting. The rest of it was just pretty boring. So I gave it 2 stars overall. I think I will read more David Mitchell, but not straight away. Just the writing in this just didn't quite do it for me, so yeah, 2 stars. It was a little bit disappointing. The next book I read is a book that I've been wanting to pick up for quite a while, and it's Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children by Ransom. And this is about a boy whose grandfather always told him like stories about all these weird children that he used to know when he was a child, and things happen, and then this boy Jacob has to go and find these children, and he kind of stumbles across Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children, and kind of all this stuff kind of starts happening, and he's in the middle of it. So yeah, this book was really disappointing for me. I thought it was just going to be better. I was just expecting more. I'm not really sure what I was expecting, but I was just expecting more, basically. I didn't really get into it until like a good 120, 130 pages in, which was quite far in. Like, it was, considering the pages, you know, it's only about 300 pages. I didn't really feel any connection toward Jacob, who was the main character, or Emma, who was another main character. I didn't particularly like them. I didn't particularly like Emma. Some of the other children who have like weird kind of different things about them are interesting, but for now, like, I'm just kind of like, ugh, about any of them. I don't really care. The pictures in it are pretty, like, they are creepy, like, but I kind of wonder if, would the story be as good if the pictures weren't included in it? And I don't think they would be, or I don't think it would be. I think the pictures kind of do make the book, but yeah, I was just feeling a bit like, okay, like, about the whole book. It didn't really excite me. It didn't particularly creep me out. So yeah, I just didn't get what I was looking for with it, I guess. So I gave it a 3 stars out of 5. The next book I read, or that I finished, was the book I read for TBR Takedown 3.5, and that was Looking for Alaska by John Green. This was, I think it stood for a standalone, and then a book that's been on my TBR for over a year, and I'm glad I finally read this. This is basically about a boy who goes to a boarding school, and he meets these people called the Colonel and Alaska, and they kind of become his best friends, and then the book is separated into before and after, kind of before something happens and after this big thing happens. And yeah, so this is kind of, again, I didn't get what I was expecting out of this book. It was okay, but it wasn't great. I kind of felt bored, actually, for most of it. The whole before section I felt like I'd read before, and I felt like I'd read it before in The Perks of Being a Wallflower, because it's very, very similar. Like, boy goes to new school, he's an introvert, he meets new friends, he makes new friends for like the first time in his life. Friends are kind of kooky and weird, and they like drink and they like smokes, and they like, you know, they kind of introduce him to party lifestyle. You know, boy falls in love with girl, kind of crazy things happen. Like, I'd read it before, and I'd read it better in The Perks of Being a Wallflower, because I really loved Charlie in The Perks of Being a Wallflower, where with Miles in this, or Pudge, his nickname is Pudge, I was kind of like, okay, like, you're a bit of a creep. He kept making mention about the girl's breasts all the time. Like, he kept talking about, like, he kept mentioning how her tank top was really tight, and how her kind of, she was really skinny, but she had all these beautiful big curves, and I was kind of like, okay, like, say it once, it's grand, like, I get it, but it was just mentioned so many times, I was kind of like, okay, like, stop being a bit of a creep about it, like, we get it, she has boobs, she's a girl, like, you know. But yeah, I don't know, it was just a bit. I didn't particularly like Alaska either. I actually didn't like her at all. I thought she was a bit of a over-the-top kind of attention seeker, and I don't particularly like those kind of people in real life, so I didn't like her in the book. And yeah, I was just kind of okay about it. It's definitely not my favourite John Green book, but I'm glad I finally read it, because it's something I've been wanting to read for so long, so I'm glad I finally got it out of the way. But in the end, I gave it a 3 stars. And the last book I finished is Tomorrow the Killing by Daniel Polansky. This is the second book in the Lowtown series, and it is kind of a fantasy series, and it's been a really long time since I read the first one. It's been about a year, 2 years since I read the first book in this, which is Straight Razor Cure, and I was really concerned about going into this one because I was afraid I would have forget everything that had happened. But there was so little connection between this one and the first one. You could read this one with just the bare minimum of who the main character was, and you got away with it, because that's what happened to me. I couldn't remember anything with the first one, but I managed to get on fine with this one. I gave this 3 stars overall, because 3.5 stars, because there just wasn't that much action. It was a lot more conversations. Basically, he's asked to find a woman who has a connection with someone from his past, and you know, he kind of ends up going on this guy called Warden. He's kind of an ex-soldier, ex-policeman, current drug dealer, like kind of knows all the people who you have to know within the slums to get along, to be able to live, basically. He has a lot of connections, and he's a pretty interesting character. He's kind of a dark character, but he has kind of some good sides to him as well, but he's definitely not like this very, you know, clean cut character. There's a lot of grittiness to him. So yeah, I just felt like this was a lot of conversations and no action, and with the conversations he was kind of putting something in motion. He was kind of playing people off each other, and he was trying to get something to happen, which, you know, he should have done like several years beforehand in revenge for something that happened to his friend or to someone that he knew a long time ago. And you kind of had to follow along and kind of figure out what he was doing, and for a while, like, I was just a bit confused, being like, okay, so who's this guy and what does he want to do? And it was a little bit confusing at times, and it got a little bit boring, like all the conversations. It was kind of like, okay, but I want something to happen now. So I gave it a 3.5 stars, so I guess like 3.25 stars really, because I'm kind of in between the two of them. But I think there's one more book left in the series, and I will read it, but this one probably wasn't quite as good as the first one. I've seen a few people who have read or who have reviewed the book on Goodreads have recommended this series for people who like Jim Butcher's Harry Dresden series. I haven't read that series, but now that I've seen people recommend it for people who like this book, I want to go and read that series. So if anyone has read that series, maybe they might like this series. I don't know. But yeah, so I'm glad I read it, but you know, it wasn't too exciting. So that was it for this week. A bit of a mixed bunch, one good one and a few meh ones. So yeah, hopefully this week will be a little bit better. Let me know what you guys are reading. If you've read any of the books that I have read, please let me know down in the comments, and yeah, I will see you guys again next week. Thank you for watching.